America's historic obesity problem has long been clear, and the food industry has been the beneficiary. But now a new class of weight loss drugs is changing everything. GLP-1 receptor agonists, often called GLP-1s, are becoming one of the most powerful forces in the economy, spreading fast enough to bend other business sectors around them. GLP-1s like Ozempic began as a medical breakthrough, but they've turned into something much bigger, reaching far beyond doctors' offices. The effects of these drugs are hitting industries that were built on the assumption that people will keep buying more food. That assumption is now starting to crack, and although the shift was subtle at first, it's now clearly visible everywhere from social media to corporate earnings calls. By late 2025, 1 in 8 American adults said they were taking a GLP-1. At that scale, the drugs are no longer a niche health fad. They're taking bites out of grocery volumes, restaurant traffic, and entire product strategies. And that pressure is arriving rapidly, much to the surprise of food executives. PwC analysis says about 20% of US households now include at least one GLP-1 user, after adoption more than doubled in the 12 months to December 2025. That is a serious slice of the customer base, and it's still growing. According to another study by Cornell, within 6 months of starting a GLP-1, households cut grocery spending by 5.3% on average. Among higher-income households, the drop ran above 8%. So much for the old assumption that consumers only change brands as opposed to volume. But it doesn't stop at the grocery store. The same research found spending at fast food chains, coffee shops, and other limited-service spots fell about 8%. For businesses focused on convenience and habit, that's bad news. It means fewer visits with smaller orders and weaker impulse add-ons. Family grocery baskets are now 4 to 6% smaller, while single-person households can be down as much as 9%. So clearly, the average basket already looks very different when more shoppers genuinely do not want the extra stuff, especially the high-margin filler. Executives have taken notice, and they're taking action. 36 non-healthcare companies had mentioned GLP-1s or weight loss on earnings calls by early 2026. A year earlier, it was 14. 2 years earlier, it was just 5. So we have a food trend that's making boardrooms nervous. And they should be nervous because there's big money at risk. Ernst & Young estimates that diet changes linked to GLP-1s could wipe out up to $12 billion in snack market growth over the next decade. You can call that gradual, but gradual still hurts and forces forecasts lower. And we're seeing this trend in other countries too. Around 5% of the UK adult population is reportedly using GLP-1 drugs, as retailers and analysts note that sales are feeling the effects. The trend is no longer speculative, and the excuses get thinner for grocers, brands, and suppliers. Amid this shift, the culture around indulgence is also changing. Restaurants are finding GLP-1 users still go out, but they want smaller portions and smarter menus. This is a big deal for the US. Fewer Americans will opt for supersize by default as habits start to adapt. However, the danger for food companies is that the basket is not only getting smaller, it's getting reordered as well. People still eat, they just have less patience for junk that once sold itself, and that threatens categories that revolve around autopilot snacking and repeat purchases. So, GLP-1s making people eat less is just one part of the story here. More than that, they're changing what people still want when they do eat. The food industry is therefore not facing a temporary volume problem. It needs to deal with a fundamental shift in what people are choosing to eat. And that's in part because some evidence suggests that these drugs dull taste buds. A recent paper led by taste researcher Richard Doty found all 5 basic tastes were significantly blunted: sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and savoury. So, it's not just appetite suppression, it changes product design itself. Because of this shift, desserts and alcohol seem to be taking a hit. PwC analysis showed that GLP-1 users consume about 40% fewer calories on average, with desserts down 84% and alcohol down 33%. That's category-level warning signs for anyone selling sugary or boozy treats. There's also strong evidence that cravings outside of food may also ease. One large veteran study said GLP-1 users had lower odds of developing new alcohol, nicotine, opioid, and other substance use disorders. That indicates that the human brain's reward system is directly involved. And as taste dulls and cravings shift, flavor becomes more important. Investors and food buyers are looking harder at condiments and spices. Why? Because people on these drugs are opting for lean protein, vegetables, and foods that need help in the flavor department without adding huge calories. And in this context, deals are already being made. Marzetti agreed to buy Japanese barbecue sauce brand Bachan for roughly $400 million after it generated $87 million in 2025 sales. A sauce business doesn't get attention like that unless buyers think there's a major shift in consumer preferences. Meanwhile, sugar is feeling all kinds of pressure thanks to increased GLP-1 usage. Sugar consumption fell 4.4% in the US and 6.7% in Western Europe over the last 2 years, while global sugar consumption growth is forecasted at just 0.5% for 2026. So, food executives are therefore looking less at the idea of treating oneself and focusing more on nutrient density. Protein, fiber, hydration, portion control, shorter ingredient lists. That all tells you where the marketing budget is going and how management teams think the buyer is evolving. What's especially interesting, though, is that these products are not only chasing active GLP-1 users, they're also targeting people who tried the drugs, came off them, or simply want the same smaller, higher protein format. The medication trend is already bleeding into mainstream food design, regular grocery merchandising, and even basic meal planning. So, the real money to be made in the food industry is probably not in stuffing more calories into the cart. Companies are focusing instead on making less food feel more substantial. That's a significant pivot for these businesses, and it's getting expensive because reformulation, marketing, and shelf space all have to change in order to make it work. So, big changes are coming for the food system, and that has major implications not only for supermarkets, but for financial markets as well. But things are moving fast, and keeping up with these developments is difficult. So, if you want to stay on top of it all, then you should be reading the Coin Bureau Finance newsletter. It's absolutely free, and we break down the key moves across markets, macro, politics, and more, so you don't miss what matters. All you have to do is click the link in the description or scan this QR code. Right, back to the video. Now, we've seen how these drugs are impacting the food industry, but how exactly is big food responding? Well, the grocery store shelf is already being rebuilt. PepsiCo and Coca-Cola are focusing on shorter ingredient lists and smaller pack sizes in 2026 because they can see the old bulk snacking model diminishing in popularity. As volume softens, packaging and formulation are key elements in strategy, risk control, and margin protection. Pepsi is even testing mini-meal ideas through Sabra and Sita. Snack companies are moving towards portioned nutrition. Why? Because loose, mindless eating is precisely the thing that these drugs are crushing, and they would rather cannibalize themselves than let Pharma do it first. General Mills is following suit. Management there has said GLP-1s are likely to push consumers towards smaller portions and foods with more protein and fiber. Now, to be clear, you only get a behemoth old-school packaged food company saying that when it thinks the change is permanent. Conagra has also moved quickly with certain healthy choice meals, labeling them as GLP-1 friendly. The logic goes that if people eat less, the stuff they do buy has to seem efficient, easy on the stomach, worth the limited appetite, and nutritionally dense enough. Danone says its high-protein products are growing at a double-digit rate, with GLP-1 adoption accelerating the trend. Nestlé has meanwhile built a whole frozen line, Vital Pursuit, around protein, fibre, portion size and nutrient density. Indulgence is not the main pitch. It's to eat less, but hold yourself together and avoid feeling awful later. And that brings us to the marketing issue. GLP-1 friendly is not a regulated nutrition standard. USDA has allowed the term in some context, but dietitians say the label can still blur the line between a real dietary need and a very opportunistic sales tactic built on a trending prescription. The interesting part here is that these products are selling beyond the intended audience. 77% of Nestlé's Vital Pursuit sales were coming from households where nobody was on a GLP-1. It may have started as pharmaceutical targeting, but it's turned into mainstream product architecture with regular health branding and a new default portion size. Restaurants are also adjusting. Smaller portion menus are spreading from independents to chains because a half-size plate with decent protein is now more appealing to many than a giant entree. Less food can also mean better economics if the guest feels good and returns sooner. Olive Garden has rolled out lighter portions nationally, and some independents have built entire GLP-1 menus. So, certain restaurants may actually benefit if they stop assuming every meal needs to be an eating contest. That is a big cultural shift in a market that used to value things through the lens of visible excess. And while food companies have started designing around smaller appetites instead of fighting them, the economic implications go beyond the food itself. Shrinking chip bags and changing flavours is one thing, but owning the drug that changed everything is something else entirely. Yes, simply put, the upside in these drugs is enormous. In late 2025, Eli Lilly became the first pharma company ever to hit a $1 trillion market value, largely on weight loss demand. We cannot overstate what that says about where investors think the next decade of profit is headed. However, while Eli Lilly was still riding above the $1 trillion mark, competitor Novo Nordisk dropped sharply over the prior year amid unprecedented pricing pressure. So, even inside the boom, the winners and losers are already moving around, and the market is unforgiving. How so? Well, the market is getting both bigger and more convoluted. The old obesity market story is being revised as US prices fall and competition heats up. Some 2030 forecasts are now closer to $80 to $120 billion, down from a previously established $150 billion mark. So, the easy money assumptions are getting challenged. Prices are falling, and they're falling fast. List prices for these drugs on company websites drop towards roughly $149 to $299 a month, far below the old sticker prices that went into the thousands. Lower prices mean lower margins per patient, but they also mean potentially many more patients, wider habit formation, and fewer excuses to wait. So, as you'd expect, volume is responding. By late January 2026, combined weekly US prescriptions for Wegovy's injection and pill, plus the Zepbound injection, had climbed to about 730,000. So, food companies look nervous while analysts argue over market valuation in revenue terms. But let's focus on the pill side of this story for a moment. Novo's Wegovy pill won US approval in December 2025, launched the following January, and had seen more than 26,000 prescriptions by its third week. Pills remove a huge barrier of friction that kept part of the market on the sidelines, as many would-be first-timers were hesitant about injections. And so, the pill numbers keep growing. More than 600,000 prescriptions have been written for Novo's new Wegovy pill since January, with early analysis suggesting more than a third of users were brand new to the category. This once niche drug has now turned into a major consumer product that's likely to continue growing because Big Pharma knows easier access can blow this market open even wider. Oral drugs are set to capture more and more of the GLP-1 market. According to research from Structure Therapeutics, pills could grab as much as 50% of the market. And if that happens, food companies have not seen peak distribution yet. Not even close. And on top of that, there's one more major factor to consider: Uncle Sam. Government coverage could push this even further by making these drugs available to a much bigger group of people. Until now, a lot of the demand has come from patients who could afford to pay out of pocket or go through telehealth services. But as Medicare and Medicaid start opening the door wider in 2026 and 2027, this stops being a niche shift and starts becoming something much bigger. The current US administration's deal with Lilly and Novo set eligible Medicare beneficiaries up for $50 a month access under that framework. Now, that does not solve all affordability problems, but it does change things nonetheless. These drugs are moving closer to normalized coverage rather than boutique purchases or influencer culture. So, at this point, the food implications cease to center around richer early adopters. This is clearly a slower, broader rewiring of how millions of people budget food shopping, snacking, drinking, and eating out. Big Pharma's gain is kind of becoming everyone else's problem, at least every supplier upstream of the grocery store. Now, so far, it might sound like this is just great innovation at work. A brilliant new healthcare product is developed, it disrupts some other industries, as you'd expect, and people battling obesity finally reach a healthy weight and live a happier life. A miracle drug. Well, not so fast. That miracle drug narrative gets a little dicey if you scrutinize it. For starters, the same research that found 1 in 8 adults currently taking a GLP-1 also found 56% of current users say the drugs are difficult to afford. That may change as governments get involved, but the fact remains that GLP-1s are still not accessible for many. But among people who had ever taken a GLP-1, KFF research found that 13% stopped because of side effects. So, the outlook for how these things impact on the food industry could change if a large share of users cycle on, cycle off, or never stay on long enough to permanently change their habits. Then things get a little darker with the grey market. In March 2026, the FDA sent warning letters to 30 telehealth companies over false or misleading claims about GLP-1s, including claims that the copycat versions were the same as approved drugs. Many think GLP-1s are near risk-free because of how popular they are, but on the contrary, some of those risks are serious enough to keep generating headlines. The UK recently strengthened pancreatitis warnings for these drugs, including rare necrotizing and fatal cases. Europe also moved to add a very rare vision loss warning to semaglutide labels, and Denmark has already compensated some patients after claims were filed. There's also another huge problem hiding behind the scales. Rapid weight loss can mean visible facial hollowing, the effect people now call Ozempic face. It can also strip muscle tissue along the weight loss journey. The cosmetic nicknames sound silly, but these are serious issues. Companies are now racing to develop next-generation treatments aimed at preserving muscle because experts worry existing GLP-1 therapies can cost patients too much lean mass. And this is especially important for older users, where weaker muscle is not just a cosmetic thing. Preserving muscle in older age is absolutely essential for your health and well-being. And with all of that, even the more bullish optimistic arguments for these drugs come with a caveat. Many patients may not maintain the weight loss after stopping. One large review found that benefits typically fade within less than 2 years. One analysis on diabetes patients found that going off GLP-1s can also quickly erode cardiovascular protection. So, the prospect of these compounds being miracle drugs increasingly sounds more risky. Instead of being a short course for an easy fix, you're actually signing up for potentially long-term dependency, with all the cost and side effect baggage that comes with that. And not just for patients, but for doctors and insurers too. The explosion in GLP-1's popularity, along with their clear efficacy for weight loss, has many saying that this is finally the solution we've been waiting for. And sure, it may improve many lives. They may help cut obesity at scale. But they also pose serious risks, and we may not realize or appreciate the gravity of those risks until some time has passed and we can see the long-term effects of these things. For now, though, they're pushing food companies into retreat, funneling enormous profits into big pharma, normalizing long-term medication for lifestyle management, and opening a fresh lane for hype, shortcuts, and avoidable mistakes. This may change as the technology develops, but we should always be wary of things that seem just a little bit too easy. And well, that's about all we have time for today, but what do you think? Are these miracle drugs that are going to solve obesity, or are people being short-sighted by hopping on this stuff? Will it be the end of fast food and snacks? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, then you might enjoy learning about the classic money myths that are keeping you back in the modern economy. You can check out our video on that right over here. That's all from me for now, though, so as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. This is Guy, signing off.